Welcome back to an obscure tour at the edge of the internet. I'm your host, the Nameless Tour Guide, and today we are going to have our minds blown by falling into the painted world of Ariamis, where we will finally meet Priscilla, the mother of the scaleless dragons Velka, Gwyndolin, and Dusk, and the first Dark Moon goddess. And to get to this world, we will use an artifact we found in the Undead Asylum, in the starting cell of the game, that was the sanctuary of Velka after her world was destroyed by Gwyn. The Peculiar Doll, a strange doll in strange dress. There was once an abomination who had no place in this world, and she clutched this doll tightly and eventually was drawn into a cold and lonely painted world. The image of the Peculiar Doll is everywhere in Dark Souls, from the painted guardians in front of us to the constructs that serve the gods, Artorias, Ornstein and Kayran, and also the gods themselves. Velka is a peculiar doll held close by Priscilla in the approach from Astora. The image of the doll comes from Paul Ackar's Ladizia de Viv, the book that we will find in the Duke's archives later in the game, and is also found in Dark Souls 2. This is a story of Mademoiselle Claire and her exploits. When Claire first travels to Paris from her family's bankrupted country estate, she has a hard time tolerating the modern people of the city, who she finds repugnant and sinful. When Claire first arrives in Paris, she is forced to share a room with Miss Melanie, the head shop assistant, who Claire calls, in a moment of weakness, ugly and wicked. In an early interaction, Claire does not clean up after herself when taking a bath in the room, and Miss Melanie stops her on the stairs and tells her frankly and without care that she is messy and must keep the small room that they share tidy. Claire does not care for her employer and store owner Mr. Coulondeau either, who claims to believe in God but never attends Mass on Sunday, and is also a follower of the radical Leon Bourgeois. This is an indignity forced upon poor Mademoiselle Claire to not only live with but serve these types of people. To deal with this, she seeks counsel from her pastor, and he observes that she has the sinful pride of her father, a wrathful drunk who bankrupted the family farm and is responsible for Claire's current position. And then the pastor tells a story from Claire's youth. You never played with your family amongst visiting cousins. You judged it unworthy of you, and you told them at each visit, inexhaustibly, histories that you invented. One fine day we demanded you stop denying your childhood, so you consented to buy a doll, your first doll at 14 years, and immediately the other children stopped admiring you. You had a doll like them. How you cried because your superiority was falling apart. It's true, I said, amused by the memory. The doll in Ladizia de Viv is many things. It is a bridge for Claire from the painted world in her head to the reality that she is indeed a child, just like her cousins. Previously, Claire's fantasies were in her head, but with the doll, she has something external to herself to project her fantasies onto. A way for her to step out of her mind and into the world of her family. And now that she was in Paris, she had to step out of the old world of her privileged childhood and into the harsher realities of her adulthood. Another aspect of the doll is one of my favourite parts of Ladizia de Viv, because it is an amazingly simple human and comedic moment. When Claire steps out of her mind and becomes part of the world with her cousins, they immediately stop admiring Claire. She was no longer above it all. Instead, she was boringly human, just like them. What does it mean to be a scaleless dragon? In Dark Souls, the dolls are many things, but the common thread is that they are bridges from one world to another, where they allow characters to play out their fantasies. And the line between who are the dolls and who are their owners is a blurred one, like the philosophical line between the humanoid constructs and the actual people of Lordran. This can be seen in the love triangle of Dark Souls. Velka has her doll, Menace, on whom she projects the image of the perfect valiant father. Menace has his doll, Priscilla, who is a vision of the perfect kindly mother, and Priscilla has her doll, Velka, who she sees as a helpless naive child that must be held close and protected at all costs. But there is a huge difference between a doll and a person. One is an extension of our own fantasies and inner thoughts, a creature of the soul, while the other is a free agent with their own humanity and desire to live, and confusing the two is what leads to a lot of the suffering in Lordran. And while most of the characters in Lordran are very aware of their own suffering at the hands of another, they seem unaware of their complicity in what happened in Lordran. For instance, Menace is shown multiple times throughout the series to be miserable when he was forced to be a doll in Velka's nursery, the city of Astora. But he never seems to be slightly interested in the suffering he caused Artorias and Kayran, as he used them to impress Priscilla. And as he created them, he built an image of his fantasies, an inseparable couple wedded together in service. And we, the player, are brought into the madness of the dollhouse in the future installments of the series, with the Emerald Herald in Dark Souls 2 and the Firekeeper in Dark Souls 3, both strange dolls in strange dress. In those games they allow the player to level up, and are a bridge between our world and another. Do those characters suffer in our service? Do we care? Or are they just characters in a video game, and I'm taking it all far too seriously? But it doesn't just stop there. What of the Bearer of the Curse in Dark Souls 2, or the Unkindled in Dark Souls 3? Each of them strange dolls in strange dress. Returning to Lordran de Viv. The pastor then reminds Claire of another event from her childhood. As the two were heading to church one Sunday morning, they came across woodcutters working in the forest. The woodcutters greeted the pair warmly, and the pastor greeted them back, but Claire refused to speak to the men. The pastor asked her why, and she said she did not greet those that did not attend Mass on Sunday. The pastor then explained that this is not good piety, as not everyone has the means to attend Mass. He then advised Claire she must be indulgent of others and tolerant, as those are true Christian values. The pastor links the woodcutters to Mr. Coulondeau, explaining he was a pious man who worshipped God in his own way. And as for Miss Melanie, he comforts Claire with the following sentiment. Be good to her, my child. Love her. Your youth still prevents you from understanding what the hearts of old women hold in regret. They do not live, they die without having lived, and there is nothing more beautiful than life. But who is to say the pastor is right? Who's to say that young Claire in her fantasy world was not happier than she was when she was forced out and into the world of her family? If Mr. Coulondeau was a true man of God, would he not be able to find a few hours each week to humble himself in front of his Creator and listen to the sermons of the priest? Is pity and empathy enough to show love and kindness to Miss Melanie, or should she stop making her bitter existence a problem for those around her? Perhaps Claire would be better off having dismissed all of them and their petty lives and simply staying above it all. But Claire doesn't want that because she knows where that leads. The woman who sits alone in the window looking out on the world, the ugly Miss Melanie and her joyless existence, all of them reflections of her timid mother who was abused by her husband and who never once engaged with her children to show them a mother's love or protection, physically or emotionally. Claire would not become her mother, as she understood the nothing that came from that existence. And that's everything from Lordran de Viv for now, as we move to another more subtle and possibly unconnected outside influence on Lordran, the work of Jimi Hendrix and psychedelic rock of the 1960s, and the reason this series is called the Dark Souls Lore Experience. Though there is a problem, they removed the purple haze in the remaster. I tell you, I look like a dang fool. Though, time to channel my inner Framp and just continue on like everything is fine. In this cutscene, notice we float above the painting. Also notice the effect on the painting's surface and the trippy purple haze behind us. Excuse me while I kiss the sky. Behind the purple haze, you may have noticed what some might consider to be the more important element of that cutscene. We were pulled through the painting, and as we were, ripples appeared as though we were being pulled out of a moonlit lake. A body of water we have been submerged in. We fight against it because we are unaware that we are being helped out and onto dry land, the frozen world of Ariamis. To understand the Purple Haze design, find a copy of Jimi Hendrix's Purple Haze from the album The Jimi Hendrix Experience and give it a listen. The lyrics echo the journey of the chosen undead, Menace, Havel the Rock, and countless nameless others. Now, time in Lordran flows strangely, especially when I forget to hit record in OBS, so I will cut here and return with a different timeline. I missed the first loop of the painted world, so just remember when we approach the bonfire, the fire is unlit at first, but then we light it like usual, and an open archway that is just beyond the fire is initially shut, and we would normally open the door on the other side after finishing the first loop. And here we are in the painted world of Ariamis. When this first happened to you, did you fall off your chair in amazement, call everyone into the room to see the strangest thing? Or did you just move on with your adventures in Lordran? If so, why? A painted world is a mind-blowing occurrence that throws all existence into doubt. Though you are playing a video game, made by the amazing people at From Software, you are in the painted world of Ariamis because they put you there. This is all very obvious when it's laid out, but when you go on a mind-bending trip, it's important to keep yourself grounded and know that nothing you see can really harm you. And now to discuss something mentioned in passing once or twice and have not gone back to, the prophecy engraved on the neck of the Titanite demon. We've discussed the first half a lot. The Dark Sun inherits the joy of family or fellowship. The second half, though, we've not discussed at all. Isa, Isa, Isa. Ice, ice, ice. We are in the land of ice, and so we will find images related to this part of the prophecy here. Notice the graphic design of the Isa runes. One small, two large. And where is this image hidden away in the painted world? Well, right here in front of the first bonfire. Ice, ice, and ice. So what do these 3 stakes in the ground mean? They represent the 4 flames of Lordran, something I've mentioned in passing, and now we can start to discuss in more detail. There is of course the 2 famous flames of Lordran, the first flame and the Chaos flame, but there are 2 more in this reading. Here we have Gwyn famously sacrificing himself for the first flame. Next, a stake with a crow, and the 3 bad apples of Isolus. And finally, a small flame that I call the Eternal Flame. As you can see, we need to find ourselves 3 more bad apples. The Eternal Flame is always shown to be small but resilient, and it seems to have extinguished itself almost immediately, but unfortunately, it doesn't. Why can time continue in Lordran with all the flames seeming to have faded? Because the Eternal Flame still burns, leaving Lordran in a twilight state of undeath. But I said there were 4 flames, so where is the last one? Well, it's right here in front of the other 3. The 4th flame is the bonfires we light as we progress through Lordran. They are all different flames, but they all have the same origin. And so, as you can guess, we need to find a whole truckload of bad apples for this one. I call this flame Jerry's Flame, after the hapless dad in Rick and Morty. But if you want a more serious name, I also called it the People's Flame, or you can use the name given to it in Dark Souls 3, the Profaned Flame. And here it is, burning naught but human flesh in Dark Souls 1. And the usual disclaimer about Dark Souls 3, which we will be discussing this episode. I have played the game through twice, once with the DLC and once without. I have very little idea about the NPCs that run around that kingdom, which I'm not even sure has an overarching name to it. Is it Lordran? Is it all meant to be Lothric? I do not know. The references I will make will be easy references to things I found in Dark Souls 1. So if your response to what I say about Dark Souls 3 is, the poor fool, if only he knew the truth about High Lord Wulnir, that is the correct response. Now, past these hollows, which is reminiscent of the hollows we saw in the Undead Asylum, we find a new set of hollows. Bloated heads full of pus, the dark of humanity, consumed from others, like we saw in the mess hall in the Undead Parish. And when these creatures die, they explode in a cloud of dark, which is toxic. We see a repeat of the idea we saw in Blighttown, with the progression of poison to toxin. Notice this toxin is different from the one in Blighttown. This one is lingering and does not aggressively attack our health. This is a lingering poison. We can live with and bear this curse as long as we have enough Estus flasks. And there we saw one of the major hints that the dark is flammable. By switching to a fire-ascended weapon, the dark burns away instead of becoming a cloud. Fire burns away the dark, and we got that weapon from Vermoose in the catacombs. He was once made of dark like the half-giants in Blighttown. He is a walking skeleton, as the dark has fallen off him and filled the coffins around him in lava. Why doesn't the lava burn through the coffins? Because the fires of Lordran can only burn human flesh. And in the distance you will see the crow women perched on the roof, a symbol of Priscilla and her children. Here we would have found the soul of a proud knight, and as we go to scavenge this treasure, the crow women descend on us and attack. Is it because they want to protect the soul of the night, or do they want the soul for themselves? The crow women are made up of two parts. They have the head of a crow and the body of a dragon. Once combined with the knowledge that Priscilla is indeed a dragon, which we will discover by the end of this episode, and the fact she is a crossbreed, which we will learn from her soul as discussed in the episode with the Capra demon, we can see she is the daughter of the Witch of Izalith and Seek the Scaleless. Now why is the Witch of Izalith a crow and a goat? That is because the Witch of Izalith is a horrible crossbreed with no place in this world. She is both a goat, one of the giants, and a crow, one of the witches. This is why there is also a giant crow sitting above her statue in Firelink Shrine, which has a nest with two unhatched eggs, Priscilla and Sen, the firstborn of Gwyn. On from that, the giant crow sits above Framp, like it's about to eat him like a worm, telling the story of the witch and her need to acquire dark for her children. The crow is also how we move between the Undead Asylum and Firelink Shrine. It has the same function as the peculiar doll. How did the Witch of Izalith come to be a bridge between worlds? I'm not sure, just as I don't know how Nito died. Are these stories in Demon Souls? I have no idea, but I need that remaster to hurry up and get on PC. And now we have another change for the remastered edition. In this edition, on this ledge is placed a twin humanity, the remains of a mother with child. In the Prepare to Die edition, this is the dried finger. A dried finger with multiple knuckles, shriveled but still slightly warm. With this many knuckles, surely it cannot be human. In multiplayer, there is an invisible timer, which starts after you are invaded. Until that timer runs down, you cannot be invaded again. The dried finger turns off this timer and allows you to be invaded as frequently as you like. And just quickly notice the white rats, different from the black rats we have seen so far. A symbol of Priscilla and Seek the Scaleless. Interestingly, the green shimmer is still on these rats. This shimmer was on all the rats in the Prepare to Die edition, and is on the walls of the Duke's archives, linking the rats to the Scaleless dragons. Now back to the dried finger. Notice the finger has too many knuckles. This is a common visual motif in the future installments of Dark Souls, where characters associated with the Scaleless dragons have long bony hands with 4 knuckles, like the merchant hag Melentia in Dark Souls 2. The dried finger is a symbol of Priscilla and the Witch of Izalith, as it is a continuation of the Endless War that happened in the first era of Lordran. With this finger you can create your own Endless War, and harvest the humanity needed for the Daughters of Chaos. And that is why it has been switched out for the remains of the mother with child, as both of these characters were dedicated mothers. The dried finger has moved to the male undead merchant in the Undead Burg, which is an odd choice. I would have put it with the female undead merchant, but I'm just a Nameless Tour guide. This could have happened because the undead male merchant gets all the extra goodies over the years. Originally, Domhnall of Xena was the NPC that supplied you with an organizing tool called the Bottomless Box, as the Bottomless Box represents part of Domhnall's story. But that was quickly patched after the game's release to be with the Undead Merchant, so players had easy access to it at the beginning of their journey. The Bottomless Box change though is actually quite poetic. It's a shame they couldn't do it for the female Undead Merchant. Now notice the hollows with pus-filled heads. There are 2 of them. In front of us we have an unarmed hollow firing flames from its hands. It is a pyromancer. The other holds a torch, like the hollows we saw in the depths, and burps out dark as though they have finished a large meal. We are seeing the progression from Astora, where the dark was feasted upon, to Izalith, where the dark was channeled into pyromancy. These poor souls are refugees from the failed experiments of the gods in Lordran. The Painted World is a sanctuary for those left behind to deal with what had happened to them. And now we have another spiral staircase, a repeat of the Archimedes spiral design. This time it spirals upwards instead of downwards, and as we try to climb, we are stopped, hampered by the Crow Women. This simple design represents the role of Priscilla and the role of her children. At first Priscilla's job was to keep Gwyn and Nito in their place. As the times changed, that changed as well, to include Manus, the Knights of Astora, and the Dark Wraiths. All of it a cycle that started with Seath and the Witch of Izalith, who feared what Nito and Gwyn would do if they were left unchecked. Seath and the Witch of Izalith created Priscilla to protect the Daughters of Chaos, the original naive children at the center of it all, who desperately needed the protection of the gods, of course. And so Priscilla was created. This is why the moonlight butterfly we fought in the Darkroot Garden is said to be a construct. Sif is a blacksmith, and built Priscilla from parts of himself and the Witch of Izalith, and that is possible because of the natural laws that govern Lordran. For life, you need a mixture of humanity, souls, and a container to hold them in. Though this was an act of blacksmithing, which requires an extra element, an ember, an optional component in the larger scheme of things. And as we climb further, notice the actual crows that decorate the painted world. What is the difference between the crows and the crow women? The crow women are partially humanoid and fall from the spiral to the pit below, while the crows are free, ascend to the heavens, leaving the muck of Lordran behind them. And at the top of the spiral we find the red sign soapstone. Be summoned to another world as a dark spirit, and defeat the summoner to acquire humanity. Certain dark wraiths resist their descent into dark, and persevere along the honourable path. The dark sign soapstone is for them. Claire would not sit in a window and watch the world go by. She would not become bitter and ugly like Miss Melanie. She would not be her timid mother. She would not serve as others demanded. She would serve those she deemed worthy. She would have the liberty of her wrathful father. She would use her life to experience the world. She would live because there is nothing more beautiful than life. And lucky for us, we got ourselves the souvenir of reprisal. This souvenir is what we will give to the Dark Sun Gwendolyn in the hidden chamber we saw last episode. This item can be acquired in multiplayer by using the blue eye orb to invade the world of those that have sinned against the gods or other players. Blood drained sunken ear. Souvenir taken for subduing the guilty. The knights called the Blades of the Dark Moon punish the guilt-soaked offenders of the gods, and take this as proof of their conquest. The earless corpses of the guilty will be left behind as a warning to others, inspiring both fear and respect for the gods. Such is the eternal mandate of the Dark Sun. The visual design of the souvenir is an ambiguous image. It is an ear, but is also a frozen piece of the soul. The souvenir is needed to keep the illusion of Gwendolyn and Guinevere alive. That is why it is drained of blood, to get rid of the poisonous humanity. The last thing we need is Guinevere getting corrupted by the dark. She is better left as a true doll, something that is just an extension of Gwendolyn's fantasies and nothing more. And the reference to the remains of the guilt-soaked offenders of the gods is a nod to most of the characters and enemies in Lordran. Maybe their earless bodies have roused at least some sense of respect for the gods, but then, maybe not. The souvenir is also found on a symbol of Priscilla, as part of the idea we saw with Vince and Rhea of Thurland. Vince is stuck with Rhea, just as Gwendolyn came to wish his mother would just leave him alone. Gwendolyn's insecurities come from his mother. She convinced him he needed the protection of the illusion of Guinevere, and gave him the magic that originated from Velka to hide from the world. And when all was said and done, Vince just wished Rhea would go away. And when the strain of pilgrimage became too much, he went hollow. What made such strong spirits hollow so? And just quickly a correction on that. I have always thought it was Rhea of Thurland, but while doing this episode I realised it was Rhea of Thurland all along. What can I say, there are always more secrets hidden in Dark Souls, so I'll have to watch myself on that one from now on. And now another difficult to explain, fun and very dark topic. Captured, I believe, cleverly in Dark Souls 1. This is the second last idea that will make this series sound like a first-year university philosophy course. And this, unlike the topics we discussed at the end of last episode, which were optional and just shortcuts to some of the elements of Dark Souls, This is more like the nature of Guinevere's ring. I believe it is necessary to read Dark Souls 1 and the rest of the series. And we will discuss this topic as I attempt to slay this undead dragon that seems to be missing its scales. Of course, we could try to analyze its visual appearance and attack moves, but dragons are for slaying, not for understanding. So I have a question instead for you all. What is the nature of time? Wikipedia defines time as the indefinite continued progress of existence and events that occur in an apparent irreversible succession from the past through the present into the future. And yet in Lordran, after our death, we are brought back to life as we continue to fight these hollows and the undead dragon. We are in a time loop, a very popular sci-fi cliche, as it gives the power fantasy of exploring the what-if scenarios. What if we had the ability to correct our mistakes? Could we make things right? Whatever that happens to mean in the story being told. This is captured famously in the movie Groundhog Day with Bill Murray, directed by Ariamis. Though for Dark Souls, I like to think of a German film from the late 90s called Run Lola Run, in which Lola has to find 100,000 marks in 20 minutes to save the life of her beloved boyfriend Manny, after he misplaces the money of a dangerous drug dealer. There are 3 loops, one in which Lola dies, but she refuses to accept that death, and her determination forces the world to replay the 20 minutes. In the tragic but humorous second loop, Manny is killed, but Lola refuses to accept that death, and the loop starts again. In the third loop, no one dies, and after a series of amazing coincidences, the two find the super mega happy ending. There is a lot going on in Run Lola Run, so if you're interested in that, you should check it out for yourself. There's plenty to be interpreted there. In the opening of the film, a security guard provides us with a sentiment that everything we see shouldn't trouble us. The only fact in the universe is that the ball is round and the game will last 90 minutes. Everything else is theory. Before the credits of the movie roll, a quote is thrown up on the screen. A quote from T.S. Eliot's poem Little Gidding, a poem about warfare, salvation, cycles, and the nature of time. We shall not cease from exploration, and the end of all our exploring will be to arrive where we started, and know the place for the first time. Through the unknown, unremembered gate, when the last of the earth left to discover is that which was the beginning. At the source of the longest river, the voice of the hidden waterfall, and the children in the apple tree. If you came this way, taking the route you will be likely to take, from the place you will be likely to come from. If you came this way in Maytime, you would find the hedges white again, in May with voluptuous sweetness. It would be the same at the end of the journey, if you came at night like a broken king, if you came by day not knowing what you came for. It would be the same when you leave the rough road, turn behind the pigsty to the dull facade and the tombstone. And what you thought you came for is only a shell, a husk of meaning, from which purpose breaks only when it is fulfilled, if at all. Either you had no purpose, or the purpose is beyond the end you figured and is altered in fulfillment. There are other places which are at the world's end, some at the sea jaws or over a dark lake, in a desert or a city, but this is the nearest in place and time, now and in England. Little Gidding is from a collection of poems called the Four Quartets, and they begin with 2 quotes from an ancient Greek Heraclitus, known as the Weeping Philosopher. He enjoyed wordplay, puns, and making his writings sound like the utterances of a mad oracle, which led him to be called Heraclitus the Obscure. The 2 quotes are interesting. The first, though wisdom is common, the many live as if they have wisdom of their own. The second, the way upwards and the way downwards is one and the same. Was that spiral staircase going up or down? Jimi Hendrix was never sure once he got caught in the purple haze. So what has all this got to do with Dark Souls, and what is so clever about it all? This dragon guards a peculiar treasure. Run Lola Run was inspired by T.S. Eliot, who came before. T.S. Eliot was inspired by Heraclitus, who came before. Time is running as expected. In the episode about Dark Souls 2, I talked about Billie Eilish's Bad Guy being Velka's theme song. How is it possible Billie Eilish was able to write a song so relevant to this game? Is she a fan of Dark Souls? I recently found a song by Miley Cyrus called Bad Karma, which could be Priscilla's theme song. Is she also a Dark Souls fan? Two women singing about the frustrations of their existence as human beings in a world that wanted them to be dolls. Perhaps there have been moments in this tour when you felt that I was discussing something that you had been seeing in your personal life or your community. But how is that possible? I don't know you. Miyazaki does not know you. This game was made 10 years ago. How can it be talking about something that had not happened yet? Dark Souls is about the collective human condition, I hear some of you shout. And that is true, but there is something very dark behind that which is captured very cleverly in Dark Souls. And just to pause here to point out another possible change in this edition. In the Prepare to Die edition, if you hit these dragon legs with a club, it will awaken, providing a shortcut to Priscilla. It still works in the original, but I cannot seem to make it happen in this edition. This is probably just user error, so I'll leave it for now. We don't need this symbol yet anyway. Before anyone had seen Dark Souls, before anyone had a chance to set foot in Lordran, besides the lucky few in the gaming press, From Software conducted a psychological experiment. They held a competition on Facebook. Users were asked to design shields for Dark Souls, a game they had not yet played. The winners chosen by Miyazaki would be placed in the game. One of the shields was the Blood Shield that we just picked up, protected by the now defeated dragon. As someone interested in Dark Souls lore, what do you do with the visual designs? Are they canon or should they be ignored? The choice is philosophical and entirely your discretion. I would keep the item descriptions as they are written by From Software and in my view are pretty important. But the visual designs can be thrown away. But before you do, the question is how successful was this competition in having people design for a game they have never seen? My personal reaction, the only one I can give, is pretty good. There are 4 shields. Sanctus, which is held by Paladin Leroy in the Catacombs. Another is called the Effigy Shield. These 2 will be discussed in time. The Blood Shield we just picked up. And finally, Iron Tarkus's Black Iron Shield. In the last episode, I linked that shield to all manner of aspects of Dark Souls, very specific aspects, like the pose of the Iron Golem. Yet this shield was created by someone who never knew the Iron Golem or the lost city of Izalith. Or did he know them already? At the beginning of Dark Souls, we see this happening. There are flashes of visions. What is the order of the timing of those scenes? And then a witch tells us a prophecy about a sealed-off city known as Drang Lake, and wonders if perhaps we are familiar. But no, how can we be? The game hasn't started yet. But the prophecy isn't just given to us, it's given to a hero of Lordran. When is this prophecy given? Before someone is marked with a bad sign or after? But we see a person being marked by a sign before the conversation is happening. The past and the future will not matter to us, to them, and we won't, they won't even care. Someone will stand at the gates of the great city of Drang Lake, not really knowing why they are there. Is time naturally a cycle, a time loop that we are all stuck in? We live a cycle of rebirth coming in and out of existence. This is what T.S. Eliot was discussing in Little Gidding. At first it seems powerful, a chance to make things right, whatever that means at the time. The ability to fix what we, or others, though they could be us, have broken. And that is part of the story of Lordran, a hope that those stuck in their time loop can escape and fix their world. But there is a more menacing side to this idea. What if there is no escape? What if we are predestined to live the same horrible mistakes over and over in an infinite loop? What if we have already seen everything that is possible in the universe? What if the sewer is all there is? That is how the designer of the Black Iron Shield already knew the horrors of Izalith and the pitiful life of the Iron Golem. Silver and red, the shield of blood, the red tears wept by Rhea of Tharaland. What was the past? When was the present? Is there a different future? What does it matter? Lola and many found the super mega happy ending after winning at a roulette table 3 times in a row. That's a lot of suffering for those of us with bad luck, but if it wasn't for real bad luck, I wouldn't have no luck at all. That's from Born Under a Bad Sign by the psychedelic rock band Cream. What is happening in Dark Souls 3 in relation to these musings? From what I have seen, Dark Souls 3 is very different from Dark Souls 1 philosophically. If you take these techniques that I've applied to Dark Souls 1 and apply them to Dark Souls 3, you will very quickly find a much darker world than Lordran. To me, Dark Souls 1 is partly about the hope humanity can be better, while Dark Souls 3 is the acceptance it is doomed. Thinking not from the perspective of the chosen undead here, but that of the hollows we have killed countless times throughout this series. They are caught in their own time loop. They are going about their existence until a force of nature sweeps through and butchers them. They have very little protection or say in their fate, and occasionally they are triumphant only to be butchered in the next cycle. But transcending the cycle in Lordran, like the Black Knights burnt by the first flame, does not save anyone from this fate. No matter whether you fix your problems, seek absolution for your sins, protect yourself or those that you care about, the force of nature will come at random, act seemingly as an agent of chaos, and destroy everything you have built. To be that arbitrary force of nature outside of time, that is a true power fantasy. A series of strange ideas indeed, and one that can and has been refuted by many throughout history. This design competition is nothing more than parlor tricks. Miyazaki canvassed a large number of people to draw abstract images. He then chose and placed those that matched the world of Lordran where he wished. A simple, rational explanation. And to badly paraphrase Aristotle, of course the staircase is going upwards, otherwise the crow women could not have fallen from it. Heraclitus is just messing with you. What does all this mean ultimately? Well, the ball is round, the game lasts 90 minutes, and everything else is theory. So now back to the normal flow of time in Lordran, and these poor mutated soldiers with larger than normal target shields and spears. This links them in a way to Trusty Patches in the catacombs. Trusty Patches is stripping the trinkets from the dead, and so he finds the spears of these soldiers. They carry a target shield, linking them to the wily thieves in the basement. In that episode, we discussed the Endless War of Lordran, and how that was related to the design of a woman's breast on the shield. This is what remains of the warriors who fought in the first armies of Lordran, protecting all 4 of the compass points in this design. At the center, they protect the image of a mother with child. This design represents the Daughters of Chaos, and the promise to the victors of the Endless War, the joy of family and fellowship. In front of us, there are 3 sealed cages. They represent the 3 lords, Gwyn, Nito, and the Nameless Witch of Izalith. The cages are sealed shut because all 3 are trapped in Lordran with no escape. We are also seeing a progression through time. These soldiers are not fully formed as they once were, they are mutated. Their physical nature has changed, and when they die, they explode in clouds of dark, like the barbarians in Blighttown, and more specifically the slimes in the depths. The slimes in the depths attacked us with 3 spikes from within. Notice the 3 spears dug into the back of these soldiers. It is as though the spears are going into these soldiers and emerging out of the slimes found in Astora. These soldiers are the ones rescued from Lordran before the building of Astora, before the armies turned completely to mush. Rather than just attacking us with spears, the slimes also dropped from the roof and tried to devour us directly. The great feast had begun and is overseen by Velka, who inherits the armies of the east and the west. And just quickly, another animalistic transformation. We are seeing snails without shells, creatures missing their home. And now to discuss the question of when was this world painted and by who? And this is the first of many unanswered questions I still have about Lordran. I go back and forth on this, but I have settled for now on this being the work of Velka and Menace. That is why there is a purple haze at the entrance to this world, and the key is found in Velka's cell. I think Menace was required because Velka was blind, and so was unable to paint it herself. Also, this world is very literal, and Menace is a very literal creator. The fact the early refugees of Lordran are here suggests it was created before Astora, as a sanctuary for the Scaleless Dragons, and the first soldiers that went mad in the cyclical existence of Lordran. The 3 spears in the back of the soldiers show that they are killed and brought back again and again. This was the first undead asylum, and when Menace built the second around his wife and her father, he could not resort to magic, and so built it far to the north. I also need something to show the friendship between Velka and Menace, and this world symbolizes their forces coming together perfectly. Impossible magic and down-to-earth engineering. Menace admired and trusted Velka greatly. They had done something great together that also led to Velka's passion for him. But did he ever love her, or was he just being kind? Having said all that, the painted world could have always existed, and maybe that is why the purple haze was removed. There have been changes to Dark Souls lore throughout the years, and it is captured in the change I am still angry about, and we'll get to it eventually. Maybe by then my fury will have subsided. And so we have just wandered through an orchard of apple trees, and as we chat, we are invaded by King Jeremiah, the Yellow King. And as we fight him, notice the 4 cages, the 4 kings of New Londo, at the edge of the orchard. Notice that 3 of the cages are sealed tight, but this one in front of us has been broken open. One of the kings has escaped. There's a couple of elements to notice about King Jeremiah. Firstly, he's a pyromancer, so he comes from a time after Izalith, where pyromancy was created. Another important aspect is that he uses a whip, a weapon I've found to be very impractical, but it appears in all iterations of the game. I wonder if this is a salute to Castlevania, where I find the whip to be a lot more useful. King Jeremiah is the leader of the Zanzus scholars. Zanzus meaning yellow or yellowish red in Greek, and he is one of the scholars we talked about way back at the beginning of the tour. The ones who hunted for medallions that have no worth than the worth that the scholars put on them themselves. What is that in terms of poetry? It is the idea of home and fellowship, a place that has endless value to each individual, yet the value may be completely lost on everybody else. And as we head back through this forbidden orchard, notice that the trees are made of silver metal, and they form the Elder Futhark rune Aldia's. This was the rune and metal sign we saw above the drowned ruins of New Londo. Recall how the moose told us that the city was a city of fire. Each of these trees have cinder and ash at the bottom, as though they were once set alight. And this links these symbols back to the nature of the prophecy carved into the neck of the Titanite demon. And while we have some time, another possible aspect about the nature of the painted world, which takes us back to the idea of cycles. If the world was painted by Velka and Menace, where did the idea and the knowledge to create it come from? Did Velka get the idea of the painted world from her books? Is the painted world not a reflection of what was happening in Lordran when it was created, but an omen of what would come? Did Velka's books tell her what had already been and what would happen again? Where do the item descriptions in the game come from? Is Velka writing out the events of Lordran, or are they prophecies she found in her books? When we read the description for Remedy, the sorcery we found in the Filth of Blighttown, we learned of Yulva the Sealer, and the story that she abandoned her duty to keep some of the kings of New Londo sealed away, to return to Blighttown to help the afflicted there, a true hero of the Flame. But was the tale of Yulva a piece of history, or a warning of what would happen in the future? And on from this, did Yulva herself read this prophecy written on her spell? If she did, a funny idea occurs. Knowing she would abandon her duty, she agreed with the plan to drown New Londo, killing the thousands of those living within, pledging herself to sealing of the evil of New Londo. But as time went on, she could not resist the urge to return to Blighttown, even though her sorcery warned her this would happen. The suffering was too much to handle. And because she did, something terrible will happen again, as it must, as it did. Is Velka's couching in the truth, not her work but the work of the nameless authors of her books? The item description of Remedy is a capturing of a hopeful wish that Yulva will stay in New Londo and break the cycle. With this idea, the painted world always existed, even though it was also created by Velka and Menace, because the past, the present and the future are all the same. The world of the Purple Haze contains a lot of confusion. And now returning to the notched whip. Whip with sharp spikes. Only slightly effective against armor and tough scales, but quite formidable against enemies with exposed skin. Also causes heavy bleeding. This whip is the story of the blasphemous Zanzu scholars. The blood of the soldiers of Lordran was used to keep alight the divine flame of the gods from the era where they were snails without shells. But this barbarism could not stand, and so the mechanisms were dismantled. Astora had to be flooded because man realized they did not need the gods to be happy. They could feast below themselves. New Londo needed to be flooded because men realized they did not need the gods to live, because they had flames of their own. The Zanzu scholars realized the selfishness that led to the downfall of the great cities, and so they found a better way. A whip to draw out the poisonous blood and humanity, not taken by gods or feasted on by the strong, or burnt away dangerously, but given out to the world for medallions, something they prized, something inert, something that could not come back to harm them or others. And when they did, the blood was collected and stored in a sanctuary, as it was no longer needed, and the daughters of chaos did not care because the eternal flame burnt for them. Lordran had broken the cycle, but then the force of nature came for them at night, like a broken king, acted chaotically and destroyed everything that had been built. Was it an act of vandalism or divine justice? Can the nature of such things be rationalized? Does it even matter?